Hey, what's going on, guys? Connor here with another episode of the 10-Minute Strength Pod. It's our third episode of this season. I guess you could say we're in season 2. We took a pretty big breather for almost a full year now, and we're back at it. And we're going to be putting these out every Tuesday, so just make sure you check our website, our Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you happen to listen to your podcast. Subscribe, listen. It's 10 minutes out of your day or 10 minutes out of your week, and you get to learn some pretty cool stuff. What we're going to be talking about today is the maximal effort method, and you've probably heard of this before. Louis Simmons popularized it via his conjugate template and Westside influence programs, but it's kind of been around since the beginning of weightlifting, right? So it's working up in its truest form. It's working up to the heaviest one rep that you can on any given day. All right. The way that they utilize it at Westside Barbell, from my understanding, I've never trained there before, but I have a very good understanding of the conjugate method, is working at or above 90%. All right, so 90% is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like your 4-rep max, and it's going to be working at 90% or above that 90% threshold, and that's going to be what's considered the maximal effort method. Like I said, Louis kind of popularized it. It was written about in a book called Super Training by Mel Siff and Yuri Verkhoshansky, and Louis took it and incorporated it into his conjugate template, utilizing the maximal effort method, the dynamic effort method, and the repeated effort method. But really, in all reality, all it is a take on a Bulgarian template. So the Bulgarians, 5-6 decades ago, they would go through their weight training and they would start, working up to a 1-rep max on any given 3 movements that are going to help increase their clean and their snatch. And they would do that every time they came in the gym. They would start off with a few days a week, and by the end of their training, they were upwards of 7 days a week, working up to the heaviest one that they could, and sometimes multiple times a day. If you've ever seen those fractional plates at a gym before, they're the ones that weigh less than 2.5 pounds. You've got some quarter pound, half, 3/4, 1 pound, 1.25 pound, and 1.5 pounds, I think, are like where they come in. And those were pretty much specifically meant to utilize within a Bulgarian template, because we're not always going to be able to go a full 5 pounds heavier on a lift, but we may be able to go up a half pound. All right, so Louis Simmons took this and implemented into the conjugate method, and that's kind of why it's gotten popular. Westside Barbell did a really good job. They're one of the strongest gyms in the world, or quite possibly the strongest gym in the world. And strength and conditioning coaches have been trying to utilize this template within their training structures for a few decades now, and we've had really good success with it. If you're really interested in like a deep dive into the maximal effort method, I would recommend that you read Westside Barbell Book of Methods. But even more so than that, Jim Windler has a book called The Max Effort Method, and it is the best explanation of the max effort method that I've ever seen. He did a really good job writing it. Jim used to train there before he came up with 5-3-1. He was at Westside. He was in the trenches doing the work and really understands what the max effort method is, and did a great job kind of putting it all down on paper in an easily digestible way. So if you're really interested in learning more about the max effort method, I would implore you to go find his book. I don't know that anybody sells it anymore, but if you type in Jim Windler Max Effort Method, I'm sure the PDF will pop up somewhere. All right, so we're going to kind of dive into what the max effort method is. All right, it is training at or above 90%, right? So in training, we work at various loads. Some things are considered sub-max, and that would be anything below 90%, and some things are considered max, and that's 90% to 100+%. In its truest form, again, it's training to a new 1-rep max every time you enter the gym. And it's just a take on the Bulgarian method. It's really that simple. It's been around since forever. People have always wanted to see how strong they are, testing their limits. That's technically max effort method type training. All right. The goal is to increase intra and intermuscular coordination, as well as kind of teaching you how to strain. That's the ultimate goal, is to create strain so that we can recruit more muscle fibers. We can learn to kind of push through some strain and get stronger as an athlete. Let's see. The goals, again, to strain. if you're not a power lifter and you're an athlete, like PRs don't really matter. Sure, they feel really good, right? It's nice to kind of see the fruits of your labor when it's on the bar and you've got more weight and you can say, oh, now I bench 350 instead of I bench 335. But the goal is really to teach you how to strain. And Dave Tate talked about straining and thinking, right? So to be able to strain and think, I think is a great thing for athletes to have to deal with, because they're going to be on the field of play where they're straining and they have to think. You put them in those positions more often, they're going to adapt to that in a really good way. The max effort method doesn't really use a progressive overload in the sense of how most progressively overload-based programs work. Sure, like our end goal is to lift heavier, and we're going to incrementally get there, which in reality is a progressive overload. But the maximal effort method typically utilizes a rotation of movements. So this method is no different from any other training template, in the sense that the goal is to get progressively stronger and progressively handle more weight, but it's slightly different in the sense that we're going to be rotating exercises fairly often here. Outside of beginners, there's no real need for you to utilize the bench press more than like maybe 2 weeks in a row, and we'll kind of go over some of that as we get deeper into this episode. The purpose of rotating these movements is to not adapt, all right? So to adapt to training is to never adapt to training. Once you've adapted to a movement, those gains don't come quite as easy. If we're handling the same loads over and over and over and over and over again, chances are you're going to backtrack and even get weaker because you've become more adapted to the movement. We're not going to gain more strength because your body doesn't have to be put in a position to gain that strength to get through the movements. So varying the loads with different movements, like let's say I want to set up a program and I'm going to utilize 4 different movements for the bench press. Bench press is pretty easy because everybody knows it. Everybody can pretty much do it. So we'll use that as an example here. I'm going to use my regular bench press. I'm going to use a close grip bench press. I'm going to use something like a 3-board press, which is a shortened range of motion movement. And then I may use something like an incline barbell press. Now, if you've spent any time in the gym before, you have an understanding that you are not as strong in all these lifts, right? You're going to 3-board more than you can regular bench 9 times out of 10. You're going to regular bench more than you can close grip bench 9 times out of 10. And you're going to incline press like less than you close grip bench 9 times out of 10, right? So what this does is we're able to stay consistently above 90% without kind of crushing ourselves with the same load over and over and over again. So like, for example, I could work at 90% for sets of 2, week 1 for 5 sets of 2, that gets me up to 10 reps. It's kind of the higher end of the rep ranges in Prelipin's chart. And then the next week, I can do 5 sets of 1 at 95%. Boom, the following week, I can change the movement, right? So if I change the movement, I change the load. However, I'm able to keep the same effort. There we go. The maximal effort method. So the effort always stays the same. However, the loads vary, and that's where those rotation of movements come in. If that makes any sense, hopefully it does. If you don't get it, drop me a line, shoot me an email. I'll explain it to you. And as far as this template being utilized, or this method rather being utilized for people who are not power lifters, those rotation of movements are great because there's zero evidence to suggest that the bench press has any carryover to any sport specifically, right? But what does have carryover is increasing our push strength. So if I can do a regular bench or a close grip bench or an incline press or a 3-board press or a pin press or whatever I'm deciding to do, if I can increase my overall strength, then it's going to have carryover to the field of play. It doesn't have to just be a regular bench press. So we don't need to focus, all right, we got to bench, progressive overload over and over and over and over again. That's going to wear itself out at some point. If progressive overload worked in perpetuity, then everyone would be bench pressing 1,000 pounds if they spent a year or so in the gym, and that's just not how it works. So what we need to know as an athlete when utilizing this method, are we getting stronger pressing? Are we getting stronger in a squat pattern? Are we getting stronger in a hinge or like a deadlift pattern? And if the answer is yes, then great. Like, that's all we need. I don't care as a strength coach, and your sport coach shouldn't care either. I don't care how much you bench, right? I want to know, are we actively progressing with our strength levels? And we can do that by rotating those movements. All right. Next thing, the modified max effort method. So with athletes can't really train above 90% all that often, right? They have to get on the field to play. They have to perform. The gym is not like their performance. The field is, right? So what we're doing in the gym can't take away too much from their ability to do on the field, because then like we're going to end up getting them injured, or they're not going to have the amount of energy they need to get out on the field and do what they need to do. So training above 90% all that often for athletes is kind of out of the question. So what we do with our athletes is we utilize what's called a modified max effort method. And it drops the percentages, but we're able to continue to kind of strain, right? In the beginning of this episode, I talked about how strain is the goal. We can get to strain by doing higher volume, all right, with like lesser percentages. So I'm going to show you a slide here. It's about Prolopin's chart. It was created by a Russian sports scientist decades ago, and he kind of monitored and watched what the athletes were doing in their weight training and saw like the good outcomes versus the bad outcomes, and he was able to compile all this data and say the majority of the time at this percentage, this is the range of reps and the total volume that we want to hit. All right, so I'll pull that up here. Oops. All right, so if you look at this, it breaks down 55 to 70%. It'll break down 70 to 80%, 80 to 90%, and 90 to 20%, or 90 to 100%. So for the vast majority of athletes, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in that 90% range because it's just not where we need to be. We're not able to get through it. It is what it is, but we can still increase our strength by working at those other percentages. So what I do with my athletes is we'll typically start in the 75 to 80% range. And again, I understand that this is not training the max effort method. This is a modified version of what that is. We'll start at 75%. We'll do 5 sets of 5, all right, at 75%, and that puts us right at the upper range, right, of what's a good outcome as far as this chart goes. It puts me at 25 reps. You can see the 24 here, 12 to 24. We're on that upper end. By the time we get to that like 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th rep, there's a lot of strain going on. It looks very similar to what's happening when we get to 95% for doubles and all that, right? Then the next week we would take it to 80 to 90%. Or sorry, not 80 to 90%. That's just where you're looking on the slide here. Take it to 80%. We're going to drop the reps down to about 4. All right, and we're going to get 5 sets of 4. Oddly enough, 75% that we talked about just now is about my 10 rep max. So we take that volume, we cut it in half, we do it for 5 sets of 5. All right, and boom, we're able to create strain. 80% is going to be about, give or take, like your 8 rep max. So we cut that in half down to 4, right? We're not going to fail at any point in time, but we're going to get to a place where there's like a good amount of strain, and we're going to do 5 sets of 4 reps there. All right, and if you look at this slide here, that 20 reps is the upper end range of what this chart says is going to have good outcomes. That means that we're going to get a good amount of strain, but we're not going to end up overtrained or getting injured because the volume's so high. All right, the following week, we'll get to 85%. All right, so 85% is roughly your 6 rep max. We're going to cut that volume in half down to 3 reps per set. We're going to get 5 sets of that. That puts us at 15%. All right, and that is the upper end range for the middle. If you look at this 80 to 90%, we're looking at total rep ranges of 10 to 20. 10 would be about where you want to be at 90%. 20 would be where you want to be at 80%. 15 just so happens to fall right in the middle of that, and that's going to create a good amount of strain. Our last week, we would go to 90%. All right, and we're going to cut that volume in half because 90% is roughly our 4 rep max. We're going to cut that volume in half down to 2 reps. All right, and we're going to do 5 sets of 2, and where does that put us? Right at that 10 rep range mark, which is the upper end of what's going to be kind of good outcomes as far as training goes. So we can create this strain in what's like considered somewhat of a progressive overload with less than maximal weights, or sorry, maximal like loads and percentages, but we can still create that strain and have like good outcomes as far as training goes and getting stronger. All right, so that's more of a modified version of the maximal effort method. And actually, I'll go back to that slide again. We can even take it to the following week, and we can get up to 95%, right? 95% is about your 2 rep max, give or take. We can cut that volume in half down to 1, and we can get 5 sets of 1. And guess what? That's going to put us right around 5 reps, which is the lower end of that 4 to 10. However, with it being 95%, 5, 6, 7 is going to be about what we got in us. All right. And then after those 75, 85, 90. 75, 80, 85, 99. That'd be 5 weeks for a beginner, not a beginner, but like an intermediate lifter. That would be actually like a pretty solid wave. After those 5 weeks, we can come back. Now we're introducing a new movement. So I can go from like an incline press to a close grip bench, right? And that means that load's going to be heavier, all right? Take that back. I could go from like a 3-board press down to like an incline barbell press, and the load is going to be lighter. You can almost think of it as like a 5-week download wave where the effort is still very high. So the loads on the body are not nearly as heavy and it's not as taxing. However, the effort level stays the same and we're creating that strain. All right. Hopefully that all made sense. This is more, learning about the max effort method and how to utilize it with athletes more than anything else. That modified max effort work is going to be great for your athletes. Again, those intermediate and even like somewhat beginners can really benefit from that 75, 80, 85, 90, even up into that 95 space before testing or introducing a new movement. Is going to have great outcomes for them. You're not putting them in a position to get hurt. You're starting off at the lower ends with 75% for 25 reps. That's a lot of volume for like one of the major lifts, right? You're increasing work capacity early on so that you can push that strength ceiling up and up and up and up. By the time we get to 95%, it's probably going to feel pretty light. You can even have them test the next week. Guarantee their numbers will be up. If you don't want to have them test, you can just introduce that new movement and keep going. All right, so that is a modified max effort method. That's how I utilize it here. We don't always start at 75%. With some of my more seasoned athletes who have been in the gym a while, we'll do 85, 90, and then the next week we're going, so 85% week 1, 90% week 2. The following week, boom, new exercise, 85%. The next week, 90%. Boom, new exercise. And you'll continuously make gains as long as you're taking into account that these movements are, kind of placed in the right order and that they're movements that are going to benefit your athlete. So to recap this, max effort method. All right, training at or above 90% in its truest form. It's working at 100+%, trying to set a new PR every time you come in. The modified max effort method is working at or near, right? Those maximal type 90%, right? Near at 85, 90, even up to 95, right? You can have your athletes in that space, but working in that space to create strain. A new PR is going to create strain. Rep 20 at like 80, 85% is absolutely going to create strain as well. All right, so slight differences between the two. Max effort 90% and above, modified max effort creating strain just slightly below with sub-max weights. All right, and you're better off with your athletes utilizing that kind of sub-max modified max effort method. All right, I've been going for a while here. We got 19 minutes on the clock. I guess you got double your money's worth today. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, max effort, 90% above, possibly working to a new 1 rep max. It could be a 1, 2, 3, or 4 rep max. Modified max effort method, working with sub-max weights, but still putting yourself in a position to create that strain so that you can get stronger. All right, that's it for today. Hopefully you guys learned something. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me with the contact info in the description. And hope everybody has a good week. Look for us next week. We're dropping new episodes every single Tuesday. All right.